My fiancée looked me dead in the eyes and said, "My parents are paying for the wedding, so they get final say." And in that moment, I realized our entire future together might already be over. Now, imagine this for a second. You've found the love of your life. You've gone through heartbreak before, so this time, you swore you'd do things right. You thought you found someone different, someone who saw you, who valued you. You plan the future together, you get down on one knee, and you hear the sweetest yes you've ever heard in your life. But fast forward just a few months into wedding planning, and suddenly, it's no longer your wedding. It's a show, a production, a performance for people you don't even know, all orchestrated by your fiancé's wealthy parents. And the worst part? The woman you love, the one you're supposed to be building a life with. She shrugs and says, "They're paying so they get to decide." That sentence isn't just about a wedding. It's about control. It's about money. It's about whose voice matters in the relationship. And for me, it was the first time I had to ask, am I about to marry the love of my life? Or am I about to marry into a family where I'll never have a say? But trust me, that wasn't even the worst part. Because when her father sat across from me at dinner and said, "Son, as long as we're paying, we'll decide what kind of wedding this will be. If that's a problem, you're welcome to foot the bill yourself," I realized I wasn't just losing control of the wedding, I was losing control of my future. And that's when everything changed. Over the next hour, I'm going to walk you through exactly how things spiraled. From the sweet, perfect beginning that made me believe Claire was the one, to the subtle cracks that began to form once her parents got involved. All the way to the breaking point where I had to decide whether I was going to fight for this relationship, or finally admit that money and love don't always mix. This story isn't just about a wedding. It's about boundaries, loyalty, respect, and what happens when the person you love most refuses to stand by your side. And if you've ever been in a relationship where outside voices tried to control your future, you're going to feel every single word of this story. So if you enjoy hearing these wild Reddit-style dramas, please hit subscribe. It really helps keep me motivated to share more of these unbelievable stories with you. When I first met Claire, it honestly felt like fate was playing matchmaker. I was 31, sitting in this cozy restaurant for a friend's birthday, not expecting anything more than free cake and small talk. My last relationship had ended in disaster, the kind of breakup that leaves you swearing off love for a while. So to be honest, I wasn't even looking. But then Claire walked in. She had this presence that made the entire room shift. Not in a loud, attention-grabbing way, but in that warm, magnetic way where everyone instantly felt drawn to her. She laughed easily, she asked real questions, and when she spoke to me, it was like I was the only one who existed at that table. That night changed everything. We started talking, then dating, and within weeks I knew I was falling for her. She wasn't just smart and funny, she was kind. She told me she admired how grounded I was, how I didn't care about keeping up appearances or chasing status. And that meant a lot, because Claire's world was very different from mine. I grew up in a modest, middle-class home. My dad was a mechanic, my mom a schoolteacher. We didn't have much, but we had enough, and my parents taught me the value of working hard and living within your means. Claire? Her father owned a chain of luxury car dealerships. Her mother came from old money. Their house looked like something out of a glossy magazine. Grand staircases, chandeliers, a pool bigger than the YMCA. First, the difference didn't matter. Claire wasn't snobby. She didn't flash her wealth in my face. In fact, she seemed almost relieved to be with someone who didn't care about all that. But slowly, very slowly, I started noticing the cracks. When I visited her parents, I always felt examined. Like I was being interviewed for a job I didn't apply for. Her mom would drop little jokes about how I must find their house overwhelming. Her dad would ask about my career with this undertone that I wasn't ambitious enough. I brushed it off because I loved Claire. And every time I asked if her parents had an issue with me, she would reassure me, "They're just protective. Don't take it personally." 2 years later, I proposed. And I'll never forget that day. Tea wasn't some flashy production. No fireworks, no private jets, no elaborate setups. Just us, a picnic in the park where we had our very first date. The sun was setting. I pulled out the ring I had saved for, and I asked her to be my wife. She cried. She said yes. She hugged me like I had just given her the world. That moment, I thought we were completely aligned. That we wanted the same kind of marriage, simple, real, and built on love and respect. But as soon as the wedding planning started, everything shifted. Her parents immediately offered to help. At first, I thought, great. Weddings are expensive, and this could be generous. I didn't realize that in their vocabulary, help actually meant take over. Within days, her mom was emailing us venue options, all giant ballrooms that screamed luxury, not intimacy. She even sent us lists of guests we'd never met, including distant relatives and her husband's business partners. Her dad chimed in too, insisting the wedding needed to be big enough to represent the family. I suggested something smaller, something personal, with people we actually cared about. But the idea was dismissed instantly, as if it was childish to even suggest tea first. I thought Claire would defend me. I thought she'd say, "Mom, Dad, this is our day." But instead, she started echoing their preferences. And then came the sentence. When I finally pushed back and said, "Claire, I want this wedding to be about us, not your parents," she looked me in the eye and said, "My parents are paying for the wedding, so they get final say." At first, I actually laughed. I thought she was joking. But the look on her face told me she meant every word. And just like that, the ground beneath me shifted. This wasn't just about flower arrangements or guest lists. It was about control. It was about whose voice mattered in our relationship. Because if her parents had the final say now, what would that mean for our marriage? Now let me ask you, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Imagine the person you love, the one you thought would always stand by you, suddenly telling you that their parents' opinions outweigh yours. The moment Claire said those words, "My parents are paying for the wedding, so they get final say," something inside me cracked. Tea wasn't just disappointment. It was betrayal. Because in my mind, a wedding wasn't about who footed the bill. It was about two people building a future together, hand in hand, making decisions as a team. But apparently, in Claire's mind, money bought authority. From that moment on, every single wedding discussion turned into a battle. The first big fight? The guest list. I wanted maybe 75 to 100 people tops. Family, close friends, the people who had actually been part of our journey. But when her parents sent over their draft, over 300 names. And here's the kicker, half the people on the list, I had never even met. Business partners, clients, old family friends from other states. At one point, I swear they tried to include their financial advisor. I pushed back. I said, "Claire, this is supposed to be our wedding, not a networking event." But she just sighed and said, "It's just one day. Why make it such a big deal?" Not a big deal. This was supposed to be the most important day of my life. And it felt like I had been reduced to a supporting character in her parents' gala. Then came the music. Claire and I had always joked that our first dance would be to a certain indie song we both loved, the one that played on the radio the first night she stayed over at my place. It was sentimental. It was ours. But her mom? She wrinkled her nose at the idea. "That's not very elegant. We should hire a string quartet instead. It'll set the right tone for the evening." I tried to laugh it off, but inside, I was boiling. It wasn't about violins versus guitars. It was about the fact that every single decision I cared about was being dismissed as tacky or childish. And Claire, she kept choosing the easy route. Instead of standing by me, she'd say things like, "Why are you making this so difficult? My mom's just trying to help." The one that really hurt though? The vows I wanted us to write our own. Something personal, from the heart. Something real. But her parents flat out refused. "That's not traditional. It cheapens the ceremony," her dad declared, as if he was the one getting married. Turned to Claire, desperate for backup. But she just muttered, "Maybe they're right. It might be better to stick with tradition." That was the moment I started wondering if Claire and I were even on the same team anymore. But the breaking point, at least for Act 2, came during a dinner at her parents' house. We're sitting around their massive dining table, the kind that looks like it belongs in a palace, and they pulled out a finalized guest list. Not a draft. Not a discussion. A finalized list. I scanned it, and my blood ran cold. Not only had they ignored my request for fewer guests, they had added even more. People I had literally never heard of. I set the paper down and said firmly, "I'm sorry, but this isn't acceptable. Claire and I should be making this decision, not you." That's when her father leaned back in his chair, looked me dead in the eyes, and said the line that still makes my jaw clench. "Son, as long as we're paying, we'll decide what kind of wedding this will be. If that's a problem, you're welcome to foot the bill yourself." And do you know what Claire did? Nothing. She just sat there, staring at her plate, silent. Not a word of defense. Not even a glance in my direction. I had never felt more alone in my life. When we got back to my apartment, I finally lost it. Claire, why didn't you say anything? Why do you keep letting them walk all over us? She rubbed her temples and said, because it's not worth fighting over. It's just one day. Why can't you let them have this? I snapped back, because it's supposed to be our day. If you can't even stand up for me now, how can I believe you'll stand up for me in our marriage? Her eyes welled up with tears, but instead of apologizing, she said something that cut me deeper than I expected. You're being prideful. My parents just want to help. Why are you so stubborn about doing everything your way? My way? This wasn't about my way. This was about our way. But in her mind, I was the problem. And that's when I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was about a pattern. A pattern where money equaled power. Where her parents' voices drowned out mine. Where keeping the peace meant silencing me. And if that was the dynamic before marriage, what would it look like after? After that dinner, something inside me shifted. Up until then, I'd been trying to reason with Claire and her parents. I thought if I explained myself clearly enough, if I stood my ground respectfully, they'd understand. But that night proved something. They didn't care about understanding. They cared about control. And if I wanted even a shred of agency in my own wedding, let alone my future marriage, I was going to have to change tactics. The first thing I realized was this: as long as they were paying, they would always feel entitled to call the shots. Claire had made that clear. Her parents had made that clear. One night, while lying awake staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I was going to find a way to pay for the wedding myself. Now let me be clear, I wasn't rich. I had savings, but not nearly enough for a full wedding. Still, I started running numbers. What if I scaled things back? What if we cut the guest list, simplified the catering, ditched the extravagant extras? Suddenly, the cost looked manageable. Not easy, but possible. The next morning, I brought it up to Claire. What if we did this without your parents' money? We could have a smaller wedding. Just us, just family and friends. Something meaningful. We wouldn't owe anyone anything. But instead of relief, she looked horrified. Without them? That would crush them. They've been dreaming of this day since I was little. You'd humiliate them if we turned down their help. Humiliate them. Those were her words. Not it would disappoint them, or they'd be sad. No, apparently, saying no to their money would be an insult. That's when I realized this wasn't just her parents' grip. It was hers to a T. That point, I knew I had to protect myself. Because if Claire was this willing to side with her parents over me before we were even married, what would stop her from doing it later? With finances, with children, with every major life choice. So I started keeping receipts. Not literal receipts, though I did save emails, texts, and every single message where her parents overstepped and Claire went along with it. I wanted a record of how things were playing out, in case I ever needed to remind myself that I wasn't imagining this. I also started talking to married friends. Quietly, discreetly. Some told me I was overthinking it. Others, especially those who had dealt with in-laws, warned me this was a giant red flag. One friend put it bluntly: if she can't put you first now, she never will. That one stuck with me. I decided to test the waters. One evening, I told Claire, I found a venue I love. It's not big, it's not flashy, but it's beautiful. And I'd be willing to pay for it myself. I watched her face carefully. For a split second, I saw something, maybe interest, maybe hope. But then she shook her head. That would devastate my parents. They want a ballroom. They've already started calling vendors. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. Please don't make this harder. T was like every time I tried to assert myself, I was accused of being difficult. Meanwhile, her parents steamrolled through every boundary without hesitation. Things between Claire and me grew tense. Our conversations turned into arguments. Our arguments turned into silences. At one point, I tried to sit her down and ask the real question. Claire, whose side are you on? Because it doesn't feel like it's mine. She burst into tears, saying she hated being caught in the middle, that she wished I'd just compromise. But compromise meant caving to her parents 100% of the time. That wasn't compromise. That was surrender. So here's where my mindset shifted. I realized I couldn't make Claire stand up for me. I couldn't force her parents to respect me. But I could decide what I was willing to tolerate. And I could prepare myself for the possibility that this marriage might not happen. Didn't tell Claire that part. Not yet. But in my head, the decision tree was forming. If she could recognize what was happening and put us first, we had a chance. If not, then maybe I was about to dodge a bullet. Meanwhile, her parents kept escalating. They booked a florist without telling me. They reserved a string quartet without asking. At one point, her father even suggested I get fitted for a tuxedo at his tailor because, quote, "We need you to look the part." Look the part. That one stung. Because it wasn't about me as a person. It was about me fitting into their image, their family portrait. And the more they pushed, the more I realized this wasn't just about a wedding. This was about a lifetime of being treated like an accessory in my own marriage. And here's the thing, I knew the showdown was coming. Because you can only push someone so far before they stop bending. And let me tell you, I was about to stop bending. If you were in my shoes, would you take the quiet, subtle route of gathering evidence and protecting yourself? Or would you blow it up publicly and call them out right away? Drop your answer below. I'm really curious which side you're on. The breaking point came faster than I expected. Claire's parents had scheduled yet another wedding planning dinner at their house. By this point, I dreaded these nights. They weren't discussions, they were announcements. They'd tell us what they had already decided, and Claire would sit quietly, nodding, while I felt my blood pressure climb. But that night, I came prepared. We sat down at the massive table, silverware clinking, wine being poured like it was some kind of royal banquet. Her mom pulled out a neatly typed packet. "We finalized the guest list," she said with a smile. 350 guests. Everything's set. I glanced at Claire, waiting for her to speak up. Nothing to, so I cleared my throat. "Actually, no. That's not happening." The room went still. Her father leaned back in his chair. "Excuse me. This isn't your wedding," I said firmly. "It's mine and Claire's. And I'm not agreeing to a guest list that looks like a business conference." Her mother's smile vanished. Her father's eyes narrowed. "Son, we've already explained this. As long as we're paying, we're deciding. That's how this works." I could feel my pulse in my ears. But instead of backing down, I pulled out my phone. I had saved every email, every text, every example of them steamrolling decisions, laid it on the table. Here's what I see. A pattern. Every single choice, you override. Every opinion, you dismiss. And Claire, I turned to her, my voice breaking, you let them. Over and over again. I wanted her to fight for me in that moment. To say, he's right. This has gone too far. But instead she whispered, "Why are you doing this here?" Not, "You're right." Not, "I'll back you up." Just, embarrassment. Like I was the one making a scene. Her father smirked, as if he'd won. "You see? Even Claire thinks you're overreacting." And that was it. That was the moment I knew I was done. I stood up. My chair screeched against the polished floor. "You're right about one thing," I said, staring at her father. "If I don't like it, I can pay for it myself. And that's exactly what I'm going to do." Her mother gasped. "What on earth are you talking about?" I turned to Claire. "We'll have a wedding, but it'll be one we actually want. Small, meaningful, ours. And if that's not what you want, then maybe we shouldn't be getting married at all." The room froze. Claire's face went pale. Her parents looked like I had just slapped them across the table. But I didn't back down. "I'm done being treated like a guest at my own wedding. I won't do it. If you want your 300-person gala, fine. But I won't be part of it." And with that, I walked out. Claire didn't come after me that night. She stayed. I drove home alone, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, my chest heavy. Later she texted me, "We need to talk." When we finally sat down the next day, she was crying. She said she loved me, but she couldn't go against her parents. She said they'd been dreaming of her wedding since she was a little girl. That I was making things harder than they needed to be. And that's when I finally asked the question out loud. "Claire, do you want to marry me? Or do you just want to marry with their approval?" She didn't answer. She just cried harder. And that silence told me everything, so I made my choice. I told her I couldn't do it. I couldn't marry into a family where I'd always be second place. Where money decided everything. Where my voice didn't matter. She begged me to reconsider. She said we could figure it out later. But later wasn't good enough. Later never comes when the pattern is already set, so I ended it. Walking away from Claire was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I loved her. I really did. But love isn't enough if it comes at the cost of your self-respect. And in that moment, I chose self-respect. After the breakup, life felt strange. I'd gotten so used to planning a future with Claire that suddenly having nothing, no wedding, no fiancé, no in-laws breathing down my neck, left me in this quiet, hollow space. But here's the thing, sometimes silence is better than constant noise. Word spread fast. Her parents told relatives, mutual friends started texting me, and the narrative quickly became he walked out because he couldn't handle her parents paying. Of course, they twisted it. Made it sound like I was ungrateful, selfish, even controlling. But the people who knew me, my close friends, my family, they knew the truth. They'd watched me fight for months, just to have a say in my own wedding. One of my friends said something that stuck with me. Man, if this is how her parents act about flowers and cake, imagine what they do when you try to raise kids. And he was right. It wouldn't have stopped with the wedding. It would have bled into every part of our lives. Birthdays, holidays, even how we raised children had dodged a bullet, even if it didn't feel like it right away. About a month later, Claire reached out. She wanted to meet for coffee. When I saw her, she looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in her presence. Like the weight of everything had finally sunk in. She told me she missed me. That maybe she should have stood up more. That she still loved me. And part of me wanted to give in. To say, okay, let's try again. But then she said the words that made my decision clear. My parents are still hurt. If we get back together, we'll have to find a way to make peace with them. And just like that, I realized nothing had changed. She still saw her parents as the gatekeepers of our relationship. I gently told her, Claire, I don't need peace with them. I need a partner who chooses me first. If you can't do that, then this will never work. She cried. I left. That was the last time we spoke face to face. Healing didn't come quickly. There were nights I questioned myself. Nights I wondered if I had thrown away something I could have salvaged. But then I'd remember the look on her face at that dinner table, the silence, the hesitation, the choice not to stand beside me. And I'd remind myself, marriage is about partnership. If she couldn't be my partner in the planning, how could she be my partner in life? Looking back now, here's what I took away from all of it. Money should never equal control. If someone pays for something out of love, they shouldn't be holding it over your head like a leash. Silence is still a choice. When Claire didn't defend me, she still made a choice. She chose comfort over conflict. And that told me where I stood. Red flags don't disappear with marriage. They grow. They get louder. And they follow you into every stage of your life. Sometimes love isn't enough. You can love someone deeply, but if they can't stand with you, that love won't build a life. Today, I'm not bitter. Honestly, I'm grateful. I know what I want in a partner now. Someone who won't just love me privately, but who will also stand beside me publicly, no matter what. And if that means waiting longer to find her, so be it. I'd rather wait for the right person than settle for the wrong one just because of history, money, or pressure. Claire. I hope she's happy. I really do. But she wasn't my partner. Not in the way that mattered, so if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Never let money, pressure, or family dictate the value of your voice. If you're marrying someone, it should be because the two of you are building a life together, not because you're bending to everyone else's version of what your life should look like. Because at the end of the day, a wedding is one day. A marriage is every day after that. And I refuse to live every day silenced. If you were in my shoes, would you have walked away too, or tried harder to compromise? Let me know your honest thoughts in the comments.